Lesson 2. Henry VII. Henry VII was born on January 28, 1457, and was the first monarch of the Tudor dynasty. He was born to Edmund Tudor and Margaret Beaufort. His father died 3 months before he was born. Henry's claim to the throne was weak. His father's mother had been the Queen Catherine of France, a French princess married to Henry V and mother of Henry VI. She had later married a Welsh squire, Owen Tudor, and head Edmund. Henry's claim to the throne came through his mother, Margaret Beaufort, who was the great-granddaughter of John of Gaunt. After the death of Henry VI's son Edward, Henry Tudor was named Henry VI's heir, being the last remaining male with an ancestral claim to the House of Lancaster. Henry was raised by his uncle Jasper Tudor. Due to the War of the Roses, Jasper sought safety for Henry in Brittany, and so Henry spent his early life growing up in France. It looked like he'd spend the rest of his life in exile. But after Richard III stole the throne from his nephew, the Yorkist party was split and Henry Tudor had a chance to stake his claim. To gain support of the Yorkists and Lancastrians in England who distrusted Richard III, Henry promised to marry the daughter of Edward IV, Elizabeth of York. After the Battle of Bosworth Field, he was crowned king in October 30th, 1485. He did marry Elizabeth of York and united both the houses of York and Lancaster. Their union was symbolised by the Tudors using both the white rose of York and the red rose of Lancaster, combined in a new emblem called the Tudor Rose. Elizabeth of York. Elizabeth of York was born on February 11, 1466, and was the daughter of King Edward IV and Queen Elizabeth Woodville. Her marriage to Henry VII was a strategic union that aimed to unite the warring factions in the Lancaster and York, symbolically ending the Wars of the Roses. Their marriage helped to establish the Tudor dynasty and brought stability to England, but must have been scary for Elizabeth. At first, for years she considered Henry Tudor as the enemy of her family. Elizabeth of York gave birth to several children, including Arthur, Margaret, Henry, later Henry VIII, Elizabeth, Mary and Edmund. Unfortunately, Elizabeth and Edmund died very young. Arthur was the heir to the throne and Prince of Wales. When he was just 2 years old, he was engaged to Catherine of Aragon, the Spanish princess. At 6, he was sent to live in Ludlow Castle in Wales to learn how to rule. In 1501, he was married to Catherine, but months later they both fell ill with a sweating sickness. Catherine recovered, but Prince Arthur sadly died. Henry grew up believing that he would always be a prince, but after the death of his brother he was promoted to heir. He later went on to become Henry VIII after the death of his own father. Margaret was married to the Scottish king, James IV, but after his death, fighting the English, she ruled in the place of their infant son, James V. Her granddaughter was later known as Mary, Queen of Scots, and her great-grandson was to become James I of England. Mary was married to the King of France, King Louis VII. She was Queen of France for just 3 months before Louis died. She then secretly married Charles Brandon, Duke of Suffolk. This angered her brother, King Henry VIII, and they were forced to pay a huge fine. She was the grandmother of Lady Jane Grey, the 9-Day Queen. Elizabeth of York died on February 11, 1503, at the age of just 37, possibly due to complications from childbirth. Her death deeply affected her husband and children. She is buried alongside Henry VII in Westminster Abbey. As Queen Consort, Elizabeth of York fulfilled her role with grace and dignity. She is known for her beauty, piety and charitable works. She played a crucial role in promoting the image and legitimacy of the Tudor dynasty. During his reign, Henry VII faced several conspiracies and plots. In 1487, Lambert Simnel, a young boy, was used as a pawn in a plot to overthrow Henry VII. He claimed to be the Earl of Warwick, son of George of Clarence, Edward IV's brother, and was last known York heir. The real Earl of Warwick was being kept in the Tower of London by Henry, and Lambert Simnel's army was defeated. Henry forgave Lambert and employed him to work in the royal kitchens. Then in 1491, Perkin Warbeck claimed to be the youngest son of Edward IV, Richard. He was a more serious threat to Henry VII as he had the support of monarchs across Europe and the Scottish king. Perkin tried to invade England 3 times. Warbeck was eventually captured in 1497 and confessed to being an impostor. He was imprisoned and later executed in 1499. Edward, Earl of Warwick, the legitimate son of George, Duke of Clarence, and nephew of Edward IV, was a potential rival to Henry VII. He was imprisoned in the Tower of London by Henry, who feared that he would be used as a figurehead for rebellion. Edward remained in captivity throughout Henry VII's reign. He was executed in 1499 as part of the marriage deal with Catherine of Aragon's parents, who refused to allow the marriage to happen until any potential claimants to the throne had been removed. These pretenders posed significant challenges to Henry VII's rule. They claimed to have stronger claims to the throne. However, Henry VII successfully defended his position and maintained his hold on power. Henry VII's reign was marked by a focus on stability. He aimed to establish a strong central government and reduce the influence of the nobility. He implemented economic reforms, encouraged trade, and promoted the arts and sciences. Henry VII was known for being very careful with money. He carefully managed royal finances, collected taxes, and avoided unnecessary spending. His financial policies helped stabilise the kingdom and build wealth for the crown. Henry VII sponsored several voyages of exploration, including those led by John Colbert, which aimed to discover new trade routes and expand England's influence. He also encouraged trade and economic growth and promoted the development of industries such as cloth and manufacturing. Henry VII pursued a policy of diplomacy and sought to secure alliances with other European powers. He negotiated treaties and marriages to strengthen England's position and ensure peace. He arranged the marriage of his eldest son Arthur to Catherine of Aragon, which aimed to forge an alliance with the mighty power of Spain. Henry VII's reign marked a transition in English history. Henry VII died in 1509, having reigned for 24 years. He was buried next to his queen, Elizabeth of York. His son Henry was then crowned the new King of England, Henry VIII. For your Henry VII activity, you're going to make a Tudor Rose. What you need is some air drying clay, your hands and some paint. First make 2 circles, one slightly larger than the other. You want to fashion each into having 5 petals and place the smaller one on top of the larger, and then roll out a small bit of clay which you can roll into a flattened ball and place in the centre. Leave this to dry. It may take several days, but once it's fully dry, you want to paint it in the colours of the Tudor Rose.